Imagine you arrive in New York City in 1885. You're in your late 20s or early 30s. You have little formal education, maybe some experience with manual labor, and you have very little money. You are healthy enough to work, and that matters because your body is your only real asset. You wake before dawn in a tenement room you share with family or strangers. The air is stale. There's no running water in the apartment. You wash at a pump or basin if one is available. You grab a piece of bread or leftover porridge, and you head into the street before the city fully stirs. If you're lucky, you already have a job, and if not, every day you're looking for one. New York's economy in 1885 runs on labor-intensive industries. Garment production is everywhere. Coat factories, shirtwaist shops, tailoring rooms tucked into upper floors of buildings. If you can sew, press, cut fabric, or carry finished goods, you might find work here. Many shops pay by the piece, not by the hour, which means that speed matters more than safety. If you're more strength than skill, you might find work at the docks along the East River or the Hudson, loading and unloading ships by hand. Longshore work is irregular, dangerous, and competitive. You wait with dozens of other men, hoping your name is called. If it isn't, you don't work that day. Construction is another option. The city is growing upward and outward. You might haul bricks, mix mortar, or work demolition. Injuries are common. There's no compensation if you fall or are crushed. If you can't work tomorrow, someone else will simply take your place. You might also find employment in food processing, bakeries, breweries, meatpacking shops, or in small factories producing wood or metal goods. These spaces are loud, crowded, and poorly ventilated. 12-hour days are common. 6 days a week is standard. If you're a woman, your options narrow further. Garment work, domestic service, laundry, or factory labor, often for lower wages and longer hours than men. However, like men, if you're injured or become ill, employment can vanish overnight. At the end of the day, you're exhausted, not just tired, but worn down. And tomorrow, you'll do it again because not working is not an option. Now, again, imagine your newly arrived resident to New York in 1885. Late 20s, little education, little to no money. Where might you live? Well, here's 3 possibilities. By 1885, 5 Points had already become a national symbol of urban poverty. It was one of the most overcrowded neighborhoods in the Western world, built on poorly drained land where streets met at awkward angles. Formerly, it had been a middle-class area, but it had collapsed into dense tenement housing as wealth moved uptown. The 2002 film, The Gangs of New York, though set 20 years earlier, shows the horrible and dangerous conditions of the area. Buildings were subdivided again and again. Basements were rented out, attics were filled, rooms designed for one family held several. Sanitation was primitive, privies overflowed, clean water was scarce, disease was constant. 5 Points was also intensely ethnically mixed. Irish immigrants, African Americans, Italians, and others living side by side, often competing for the same low-paying jobs. It had a reputation for crime and vice, but that reputation often obscured the reality. This was a neighborhood of constant labor, survival, and improvisation. People worked when they could, pooled resources, and relied on informal networks just to get through the week. By the 1880s, reformers were already calling 5 Points a moral failure of the city, not because of its residents, but because of the conditions imposed on them. The Lower East Side in 1885 was one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Entire city blocks were packed with 5- and 6-story tenements built quickly and cheaply to house waves of immigrants, especially Jewish families from Eastern Europe, along with Germans, Italians, and Irish. Life here was loud, crowded, and relentlessly active. Streets were full from dawn until late at night. Pushcarts lined the sidewalks. Children worked, played, and slept in shared spaces. Many apartments doubled as workplaces. Sewing, food preparation, it blurred the line between home and factory. Most families lived on the edge of hunger. Rent took a large share of wages. Ventilation was poor. Fires were common. Tuberculosis spread easily in rooms with sealed windows and little sunlight. Yet, the Lower East Side was also a place of community and resilience. Mutual aid societies, informal childcare, religious institutions, and labor organizing all took root here. Poverty did not mean passivity. It meant constant negotiating with a harsh environment. What we now call the Garment District did not yet exist as a polished commercial zone. In 1885, garment production was scattered across Lower Manhattan and the Lower East Side, embedded inside tenements, lofts, and converted residential buildings. Small workshops, often called sweatshops, occupied upper floors with little light or airflow. Dozens of workers crowded around sewing machines, cutting tables, or pressing irons. Work was often paid by the piece, not by the hour, which meant that speed mattered far more than safety. Garment work was especially common to newly arrived immigrants because it required little formal education. Skills could be learned quickly. Families often worked together. Men doing the cutting, women sewing, children finishing or carrying bundles. The workday stretched long into the evening, and seasonal demand meant sudden layoffs followed by frantic overwork. Fires were a constant risk. Exits were blocked. The dangers were obvious, but alternatives were few. This industry would later produce some of the most infamous labor tragedies in American history. In 1885, it was already quietly grinding people down. What were the wages? What was the cost of living of the era? In 1885, the average annual wage for industrial or transportation workers was around $581. $581 for the year. But pay varied drastically by occupation, gender, and race, with some skilled laborers earning over $1 a day, while unskilled domestic or hotel workers might earn $12 to $35 a month. This reflects the significant economic inequality of the Gilded Age. While housing and some meals could be included in compensation, keeping living expenses minimal was an absolute necessity. This often required frugal spending for necessities like food, modest rent, few luxuries like new clothes or new shoes. To be poor in the Gilded Age was not simply to earn little money. It was to live without margin. Every decision carried risk. Missing a single day of work could mean eviction. A minor injury could mean permanent unemployment. Illness wasn't just a health crisis. It was an economic catastrophe. There was no unemployment insurance, no minimum wage, no guaranteed medical care. There was no safety net waiting beneath the fall. Charity existed, but it was uneven and often conditional. Assistance came with judgment. Poverty was moralized, treated as evidence of personal failure rather than a predictable outcome of an industrial economy built on cheap, replaceable labor. As historian Richard Hofstadter observed, Many reformers worried as much about social order as they did about the actual suffering itself. The message was clear. Survival was your responsibility alone. And yet, most poor Americans were not idle. They worked constantly. Factories ran 12-hour days, sometimes longer. Machinery was fast, powerful, and unguarded. Accidents were not rare, they were expected. Fingers were lost, limbs were crushed, lives ended suddenly in places where production schedules did not pause. If a worker was injured, they were replaced. If they complained, they were blacklisted. If they organized, they were treated not just as a workplace problem, but as a threat to social order. As historian Jay Martin shows, workers were essential to the economy, but expendable within that economy. They were inputs, not investments. This reality fell hardest on immigrants, women, and people of color, groups whose labor was indispensable and whose protection was minimal or non-existent. For children, poverty was not an interruption to childhood, it was childhood. Frequently, boys worked in coal mines and factories, girls labored in textile mills and canneries. Some sold newspapers on city streets or worked inside the same tenement rooms they slept in. Education was optional. Survival was not. Reformers like Jacob Riis would later use photographs and testimony to shock the nation's conscience. But for decades, child labor was treated as an unfortunate necessity, an accepted cost of growth, an accepted cost of doing business. When reform finally came, it came slowly, and for many children, it came too late. At this point, the Gilded Age stops being merely a story about inequality and becomes something more unsettling. It becomes a story about choice. The wealth existed, the knowledge existed, the alternatives existed. Economist and social critic Henry George asked a question that still echoes today. Why does poverty deepen even as wealth increases? His answer was not that progress had failed, but that progress, left unchecked, had been allowed to concentrate its rewards while dispersing its harms. Again and again, society chose growth over protection, efficiency over care, profit over safety. Not necessarily because people were cruel, but because the system rewarded distance. It is easier to admire success than to confront suffering. It is easier to celebrate progress than to ask who paid for it. This moral tension was not hidden at the time. It was simply unresolved. And what makes that tension especially powerful is that it has not vanished. We still see it today in the systems in place in our modern world. You can still walk through that history today. As a side note, these moments are at the heart of my work, the moments where choices are made. My hope is that by learning the complexity of history, we recognize moments that echo from history. And in those echoes, I hope we learn to make new, different, hopefully better choices. As far as tangible places of the Gilded Age and of Gilded Age history is concerned in New York City, the restored apartments at the Lower East Side Tenement Museum allow visitors to stand inside the kinds of rooms where entire families once lived, worked, and slept. These spaces make clear what statistics alone cannot. Poverty was intimate. It filled every corner of daily life. Just a few miles away, the former Triangle Shirtwaist Factory building, now part of the New York University campus, stands as a quiet memorial to how fragile working lives were and how often tragedy was the only force strong enough to produce reform. Elsewhere, other sites reveal how industrial prosperity depended not just on labor, but on control. In Chicago, Pullman National Historical Park preserves a company town designed to appear orderly and humane while tightly regulating workers' lives. Housing, wages, even public behavior were overseen by the same corporate authority. Farther east, in Braddock, Pennsylvania, the towering remains of the Carey furnaces still dominate the landscape. Skeletal reminders of the steel industry, where extreme heat, dangerous machinery, and relentless schedules shaped daily existence. These are the places where American wealth was forged, often at great human cost. Do we choose to celebrate them as monuments to wealth and progress, or as memorials to the nameless workers who struggled to survive there? And then there are the spaces built to impress and endure. In Newport, Rhode Island, the Vanderbilt mansion, known as the Breakers, was designed to astonish, not just shelter. In Asheville, North Carolina, the Biltmore estate rises as the largest private home ever built in the United States. These places are breathtaking, beautiful, carefully preserved, openly celebrated. What they rarely show, however, at least at first glance, is the labor that sustained them. The servants, factory workers, miners, and children whose lives made such luxury possible. Now, that side of history interpretation has improved, and HBO's Gilded Age gives us some idea of this. Seen together, these sites tell the same story as the Gilded Age itself. Prosperity and suffering existing side by side, asking us not just what America built, but who it chose to protect along the way. When we return to this era through popular culture, through shows like the Gilded Age, we are naturally drawn to what was meant to be remembered. The elegance, the beauty, the confidence, the splendor, the permanence. What fades more easily are the lives that were never meant to last. The factory floors, the cramped rooms, the daily calculations of survival. Memory, like wealth, is unevenly distributed. We remember what was built to be remembered. But to be poor in the richest era America had ever known meant living inside contradiction. It meant watching wealth accumulate around you while your own life remained fragile. It meant being indispensable to the economy and disposable to the system. And it meant discovering, day after day, that prosperity alone does not guarantee justice. The Gilded Age forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Economic success does not answer moral questions, it only raises them. And that continues to be true today. In the next chapter of this story, workers begin to push back. Poverty turns into protest. And the American dream meets at least some of the people it had failed. Until next time, safe journeys.